The recycling bins were lined up at the curb and somebody had set Delia's boxes next to them. Not on the porch, not inside the front door. Next to the recycling bins, like they were waiting to be collected on Thursday morning. She stood on the driveway of the house she had lived in for 9 years, still wearing her physiotherapy scrubs, her lanyard from Ridgeview Health Center swinging against her chest. It was 6:47 in the evening. She had just finished a 10-hour shift. Her feet hurt, and every book she owned, every sweater, every photograph from her parents' kitchen in Sudbury, was packed into 8 cardboard boxes sitting beside a blue bin on a Tuesday in November. The front door opened. Mitchell Graydon stepped onto the porch with his arms crossed. He had changed out of his work clothes into the gray joggers he wore when he was comfortable, when he felt like he had the upper hand. "I was going to call you," he said. Delia Graydon looked at the boxes. She looked at her husband. She looked at the house behind him, the one she had repainted the kitchen in twice because he kept changing his mind about the color. "What is this?" "I think you know what it is, Mitchell." Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "What is going on?" He walked down 2 steps and stopped there, looking down at her from the height advantage he always liked. 9 years and she still noticed how he positioned himself. "This isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time and I'm done pretending otherwise. We were fine this morning." The words sounded ridiculous even as she said them. He had kissed her on the cheek before she left for work. She had driven to Ridgeview thinking about what to make for dinner. "We weren't fine this morning. We haven't been fine in years. I just didn't want to keep dragging it out." A movement in the window caught her eye. Someone was standing in the living room. A woman, partially obscured by the curtain, holding what looked like a mug. Delia's mug, the one her colleague Priya. No, someone else, someone from a previous thought. The one her colleague Bettina had given her when she got her certification. "Who is that?" Mitchell's jaw tightened. "That's not the point right now. Who is in our house?" "Her name is Vanessa." He said it like stating a fact about the weather. "She works in my department. We've been seeing each other for a while." The driveway felt like it tilted. Delia grabbed the strap of her bag. "How long is a while? That's not something I'm going to get into right now." "Mitchell, how long?" He exhaled like she was the one being unreasonable. 14 months, give or take. 14 months, give or take. Delia thought about 14 months ago, the trip they took to Prince Edward Island, the weekend in Ottawa when he said he felt like they were finally finding their rhythm again. The card he wrote her on their anniversary, "To the woman who keeps this house a home." She had kept it in her nightstand drawer. She wondered if it was in one of the boxes. "I need you to take your things and go stay somewhere else for a while." Mitchell was using his management voice now, the one he used in meetings, the measured tone that made everything sound reasonable. "I'll have my lawyer reach out about next steps. We can do this calmly or we can make it complicated. I'd prefer calm." "You're telling me to leave." She said it flatly, not a question. "I'm saying it's better for everyone if you give us some space. This is my home. Technically both our names are on the mortgage, which is exactly why my lawyer will be in touch. But right now, tonight I need you to take your boxes and go." The neighbor across the street, an older woman named Mrs. Tran, had appeared on her front step under the guise of checking her mailbox. 2 houses down, a man Delia barely knew was standing very still beside his car with his keys in his hand. Mitchell's voice dropped slightly, just enough to be cruel without being loud. "I know this is hard to hear, but you have to understand that I haven't been happy. For years, Delia, you've been so focused on work, on your patients, on everything but us. I can't keep living like this. Vanessa understands me in ways that—" "Stop." Delia held up her hand. "Don't, I'm just being honest." "You are not being honest. You are standing on a porch in November telling your wife to sleep next to the recycling bin." Her voice cracked and she hated it. 14 months, Mitchell. You smiled at me every morning for 14 months. He looked away, not because he was ashamed, she understood that now, but because he was bored with the conversation. "Take your boxes, Delia. My lawyer will call your lawyer." "I don't have a lawyer." He shrugged. One small careful shrug that contained 9 years. "You should probably get one." A car had pulled up to the curb behind her. She heard the door and didn't turn around. She couldn't look at anything other than Mitchell's face right now, the face she had woken up next to for 9 years, trying to understand how it had become a stranger's face without her noticing. "Mrs. Graydon?" She turned. The man standing beside the car was someone she recognized, though it took her brain a moment to place him. Noel Adeyemi. He was a cardiologist at Ridgeview, one of the senior physicians, someone she had spoken to maybe a dozen times in 4 years, in hallways, at the nursing station, once at the Christmas function the hospital held at the Marriott downtown. He had a daughter who had been in her care unit briefly the previous winter. She remembered him sitting in the hallway outside the room with his laptop, working because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. He was still in his jacket from the hospital, a dark wool coat, a lanyard still visible beneath his collar. He must have just come from a shift himself. Is everything all right? He asked, and the question was so basic, so ordinary that it almost broke her completely. This is a private matter, Mitchell said from the porch. Noel Adeyemi looked at the boxes by the recycling bin. He looked at Delia's face. He looked at Mitchell with the kind of calm that didn't require any particular expression. Are those your things? He asked Delia quietly. She nodded. She couldn't speak. Do you have somewhere to go tonight? She opened her mouth and closed it again. Her parents were in Sudbury, 300 kilometers north. Her closest friend Yolanda was dealing with her own situation. A sick mother, a busy house, no room. She had called her once a week for 9 years, but she had also, she realized, spent 9 years organizing her life entirely around Mitchell's preferences for how they spent their time. No, she said. Noel reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card. He offered it to her without ceremony. I have a separate entrance apartment above my garage. My last tenant moved out 2 months ago. It's sitting empty. He paused. You can stay there tonight as long as you need, actually. No strings, no conditions. Just a safe place while you sort things out. Mitchell had come down off the porch now. Who, exactly, are you? My name is Noel Adeyemi. I'm a cardiologist at Ridgeview. Noel said it without heat, which was somehow more effective than anger would have been. Your wife treats patients at that hospital. I know her professionally, and I'm offering her a safe place to stay because she's standing next to her belongings on a driveway in November. She's not going to need some stranger's garage apartment. This is between us. That may be, Noel said. But right now it looks like she's been asked to leave her home and she has nowhere to go. So I'm asking her, not you. He turned back to Delia. What would you like to do? She looked at the boxes. She looked at the house. The kitchen she had painted twice, the garden she had put in over 3 summers, the door she had chosen because Mitchell said the original was too dark. She looked at Mitchell's face, carefully neutral now, performing reasonableness for an audience. She picked up the nearest box. I'll take you up on that, she said. Noel helped her load the boxes into his car without comment. Mitchell watched from the porch, his arms recrossed, his face doing something complicated. She did not look at him again. As the car pulled away from the curb, Delia watched the house disappear in the side mirror. She felt nothing. That would come later. For now she just felt very far away from her own life, like she was watching it through a window from outside. I'm sorry, she said after a moment. For what? For, I don't even know. For this. She gestured vaguely at herself, at the boxes in the back seat, at the whole situation. You don't know me well. This is a lot to take on. I remember my daughter's stay in the pediatric unit last February, he said. He kept his eyes on the road. You were working a double shift and you still came in to check on her before you left. You brought her a book from the cart in the hall, because you'd noticed she was bored. He paused. You're not a stranger to me. Delia looked out the window at the city moving past. The streetlights were already on. It was barely 7 o'clock and it felt like the middle of the night. The apartment above Noel's garage was small and warm, and completely separate from the main house. It had its own entrance, its own bathroom, a small kitchen with a kettle and a coffee maker and actual coffee in the cupboard. The couch was comfortable and faced a window that looked out over a quiet street lined with maples, bare now but probably extraordinary in autumn. Noel carried the last box up and set it by the door. There's Wi-Fi, the password is on the router, the lock is a deadbolt, key is on the counter. If you need anything you can text or call, that's my cell on the card. Get some rest. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. Dr. Adeyemi? Noel. She stopped. She didn't know how to finish the sentence. Thank you seemed completely inadequate. Why are you doing this seemed ungrateful. I'll try not to be a disruption. You're not a disruption, you're a person in a difficult situation. He said it simply, the way he probably said difficult things to patients. Not unkindly, not dismissively, just factually. Get some sleep. After he left, Delia sat on the couch in her scrubs and did not sleep. She sat very still in the quiet of a space that was not hers, in a life that had rearranged itself without warning, and she tried to understand the shape of what had just happened. 14 months. She did the math. She had been working on the Henderson file, the research project, the grant application. 14 months ago. She had been working extra hours. She had been tired. She had thought Mitchell was being patient. She had been grateful for his patience. He had not been patient. He had been occupied. Her phone was full of calls from Mitchell. She deleted the notifications one by one without reading them. Then she opened her banking app, the one she used for their joint account, and looked at the balance. The account had $203 in it. She stared at the number for a long time. Their joint account usually held several $1,000s, their shared expenses fund, the one they both contributed to for bills and groceries and anything household. Mitchell controlled the contributions from his side. She had never questioned it. She had trusted him. She opened her laptop and started looking at the account history. The transfers were small at first, irregular, the kind of thing that looked like ordinary bill payments, then larger still. Over the past 8 months, just over $18,000 had been moved out of the joint account in increments. She would never have noticed if she hadn't been looking. She got her notebook out of one of the boxes. She always packed a notebook. It was a reflex, and she started writing things down. She wrote until 2 in the morning. By then she had a clear timeline, a list of every transaction she could document, a list of every financial decision they had made together in the past 2 years where she had deferred to him. She had photos of the bank statements on her phone. She had the mortgage document saved in her email from when they had renewed it. Her name was on that mortgage. She had paid into it every single month. When she finally lay down on the couch, fully clothed, she did not feel like someone whose life had ended. She felt like someone who had just figured out where to start. Noel knocked on the apartment door at 8 the following morning with a coffee in each hand and the name of a family law lawyer written on the back of an envelope. "Her name is Carolyn Fang," he said. "She's based in the annex. She's good, and she charges on a sliding scale for certain clients. I called in a favor last night." Delia stared at him. "You called someone last night?" "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boxes by the recycling bin." He offered her the coffee. "You don't have to see her if you don't want to, but if you do, she can meet you this week." Delia took the coffee. "Why are you doing all of this?" He was quiet for a moment, leaning against the doorframe. "My sister left a marriage 8 years ago. Took her 2 years to leave because she had no money of her own, nowhere to go, no one who stepped up early enough." He turned the other coffee cup in his hands. "By the time I fully understood what she'd been going through, she'd already lost a lot of ground she didn't have to lose. If I can do something different for someone else, I'm going to do it." "Where is she now, your sister?" "Vancouver. She runs a catering company, has a daughter who is completely wild and wonderful." A small smile. "She's fine, but it took longer than it should have." Delia looked down at her coffee. "I found something last night, in the account records." She told him about the transfers, the $18,000. The 8 months of small, careful movements. Noel's expression didn't change exactly, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Does Carolyn know this when you see her?" "I have it all documented. Then she'll know exactly what to do with it." Carolyn Fang's office was on a side street west of Spadina, up a flight of stairs above a dry cleaner. The kind of office that looked modest from the outside and turned out to be meticulous on the inside. Books organized by subject, files in precise order. A desk that held only what was currently relevant. She was in her early 50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and the manner of someone who had heard a great many things, and retained the capacity to be bothered by all of them. She listened to Delia without interrupting. When Delia produced her notebook and the phone with the bank records, Carolyn leaned forward. "Walk me through the transfers," she said. They spent 2 hours going through everything. Carolyn made notes, asked precise questions, occasionally paused to write something underlined that she did not explain. When they reached the end of what Delia had, Carolyn sat back and removed her glasses from her head entirely. "Your husband has been systematically depleting a shared marital asset," she said. "That is financial misconduct within a marriage. Combined with the documented affair, I assume you have text records, emails, anything like that?" "I have access to our shared email account. We set it up years ago for joint subscriptions and household documents. I haven't checked it yet, but check it before we meet again. Screenshot everything. Don't delete anything, don't confront him, don't signal that you know." Carolyn replaced her glasses. "The affair itself affects asset division in Ontario in limited ways, but the financial misconduct significantly strengthens your position. The fact that you've been contributing to a joint mortgage that he is now attempting to leverage against you is extremely relevant." She paused. "You said your name is on the deed?" "Yes. Then he cannot remove you from that property without a court order. His lawyer calling yours about next steps is posturing. It's meant to make you feel like you have less standing than you do." Carolyn looked at her steadily. "You have a great deal of standing, Ms. Graydon." Delia had not cried once since she arrived at the office. She cried then briefly, turning her face to the side, pressing her fingers against her eyes until it stopped. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't apologize." Carolyn handed her a tissue from a box that was positioned exactly where it needed to be. "I file today. We freeze what's left in the joint account before he moves any more of it. I request full financial disclosure, and I file for exclusive possession of the matrimonial home pending the divorce settlement." She is all of this calmly, the way someone lists items they have handled many times before. Any lawyer he hires will understand very quickly that this is not a case where the wife walks away with whatever he's willing to offer. On the drive back to Noel's garage apartment, Delia sat with her hands folded in her lap and felt something she hadn't expected. Clarity. Not happiness, not relief exactly, but the particular sensation of knowing what the next step was, and the one after that. Mitchell had been calling her from rotating numbers since her block of his went through. She showed each unknown number to Carolyn, who told her to save and forward every single one. She did. That evening Noel was in his kitchen when she knocked on the main house door. He opened it, looked at her face and stepped aside. "Tell me how it went," she told him. He listened over tea, both of them at the kitchen island, while she described Carolyn's assessment, the financial disclosures she was requesting, the possession order. "She sounds like exactly the right person," he said. "How did you find her?" "We referred several patients' families to her over the years. Situations where someone was leaving a difficult marriage with limited resources, and we needed someone who wouldn't add to the problem." He looked at his mug. "Medicine puts you in contact with a lot of people's worst days. You learn who to trust in those circumstances." Delia looked at him across the island. "You're very calm about all of this." "Someone has to be," he said mildly. She almost laughed. It surprised her. The feeling of almost laughing. The fact that it was possible at this particular moment in her life. "Mitchell is telling people at his office that I left him for you," she said. "I got a message from someone we both know. He's apparently saying we've been involved for months." Noel raised an eyebrow, very slightly. "Is he? I wanted you to know in case it gets back to anyone at Ridgeview. It won't matter to anyone at Ridgeview who knows either of us." He set down his mug. "And for the people who don't know us well enough to judge, their opinion isn't something I'm particularly concerned about." He looked at her. "Is it something you're concerned about?" She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "I think I'm past the point where Mitchell's version of events is something I need to manage." Good. 3 days later, Mitchell was served at his office building on Bay Street. Carolyn had timed it precisely, and Delia knew from the 17 missed calls on her block number log that he had received the papers. He showed up at her workplace. She was in the middle of a session with a patient, a 60-year-old man recovering from knee replacement, when her supervisor, a steady woman named Genevieve Okafor, came to the treatment room door and asked for a word. "There's a man in the lobby saying he's your husband," Genevieve said quietly in the hallway. "He's asking to speak with you. He's been," she chose the word carefully, "insistent he has no right to be here. There's a restraining provision in the separation filing." "I know. Security is with him. The police have been called." Genevieve put a hand briefly on her arm. "Are you all right?" "Yes." Delia meant it. "Don't let him upstairs." She watched on the lobby camera from Genevieve's office. Mitchell was red-faced, talking rapidly at the security guard, gesturing in the way he did when he felt he wasn't being given the appropriate level of attention. 2 police officers arrived within 8 minutes. She watched them speak to him. She watched his posture change when they mentioned the separation filing. She called Carolyn. "He's just made this considerably worse for himself," Carolyn said with the unruffled tone of someone who is rarely surprised. "This is documented as harassment and a violation of the provisions. We'll add it to the file." A pause. "Also, I've had a productive conversation with his financial institution. The full disclosure request has been submitted. I think we're going to find more than you initially documented." There was more. Delia found it herself, 2 evenings later, sitting in the garage apartment with the shared email account open and her notebook ready. There were 3 years of emails between Mitchell and this woman Vanessa, dating back further than he'd admitted. There were references to plans, careful, considered plans about timing, about what he intended to keep and how he intended to keep it. One email from 11 months ago, Mitchell to Vanessa. "Once the house is dealt with, she'll have nothing to leverage. Just need to be patient a little longer." She took a screenshot and sent it to Carolyn without comment. Carolyn's reply came in 12 minutes. "This is exactly what I needed. Well done." Noel was working from home the day the court date arrived. He drove her to the courthouse and waited in the hall outside with a paperback he didn't appear to be reading. When she came out, 2 hours later, he looked up from page 4. "The house is mine," she said. "Possession order and a settlement in my favor. 58% of joint assets, repayment of the transferred funds and support for 2 years. She exhaled. "His lawyer tried to introduce the theory that I was having an affair with you. The judge," she paused. "The judge did not find that compelling, given the evidence of what Mitchell had actually been doing." Noel nodded slowly. "He has 30 days to vacate the property. How do you feel?" She thought about it. "Like something very heavy has been set down." She looked at her hands, "and also like I need to eat something. I haven't eaten since 6 this morning." "There's a roadie place 3 blocks from here," he said. "I've been thinking about it for the past hour." She laughed, a real one, and it echoed in the courthouse hallway. They walked the 3 blocks in the November cold and ate at a small table by the window and didn't talk about Mitchell or lawyers or court orders. They talked about his daughter, who was apparently demanding a dog with an intensity that he described as genuinely impressive. They talked about the research project Delia had been neglecting for 3 months, and the grant deadline she was going to have to hustle to meet. They talked about the roadie. Outside Mitchell's office the following week, 2 police officers led him out in handcuffs for the second time. The financial disclosure Carolyn had requested had uncovered a pattern of account manipulation going back nearly 3 years. Money moved through a secondary account she hadn't known existed. Funds redirected from a joint investment they had made together when they first bought the house. The total was closer to $40,000. His company's compliance department had opened a parallel review when some of the account numbers overlapped with his professional expense records. Delia heard about this from Carolyn, not from any desire to monitor Mitchell's unraveling. She was at the hospital when it happened, treating a 14-year-old recovering from ACL surgery, explaining very patiently why it was going to be boring for a while before it got interesting. She did not feel satisfaction exactly. She felt that Mitchell's choices had produced Mitchell's consequences, and that she had had very little to do with either. She moved back into the house at the end of the month. Noel and his daughter, whose name was Zara, and who was indeed impressive, helped her carry the 8 boxes back inside. Zara had strong opinions about how the living room should be arranged and expressed them with complete confidence. Delia rearranged accordingly and found, to her surprise, that Zara was right about most of it. "She's like this about everything," Noel said when Zara had moved on to assess the kitchen with her arms crossed. "I like her," Delia said. "She likes you too," she told me this morning. The house felt different when it was hers alone, not hollow, the way she had feared, but spacious in a way it had never quite been when she was always managing someone else's comfort within it. She repainted the kitchen a color she had always wanted, and that Mitchell had always dismissed as too bold. She planted things in the garden that she liked, not things she had agreed to because he'd suggested them. She went to the support group that Carolyn had mentioned during one of their meetings, a group for women dealing with financial abuse in relationships. She went once because she felt obligated and twice because she found she actually wanted to. She was quiet the first few sessions and then she wasn't. By spring, she was the person other women in the group called when they had questions about documenting accounts, about what to do first, about whether their situation was as bad as they thought or worse. She answered them honestly because she had been there. Because she still had her notebook with the careful handwriting from that first sleepless night in the garage apartment. A woman named Rosalind called her on a Saturday morning. Rosalind had been given Delia's number by someone in the group. "I don't know where to start," Rosalind said. Her voice had the flat, careful quality of someone who had been crying for a long time and had run out. "I know," Delia said. "I know that feeling exactly. Here's what you do first." She walked her through it, the notebook, the accounts, the screenshots. She gave her Carolyn's number. She told her about the provisions in the separation process that most people didn't know about. She stayed on the phone for an hour and 40 minutes, until Rosalind's voice changed from flat to something that had some texture in it. After they hung up, Delia sat in her kitchen, the one with the walls that were now the blue-green she had always wanted, and thought about the woman who had stood on a driveway in November next to recycling bins, and thought she had nothing. She had had a notebook. She had had 9 years of knowing how to read the situation when a patient was in pain and couldn't say so. She had had, without knowing it, the reflex to look clearly at difficult things rather than away from them. Those turned out to be enough. She texted Noel. Rosalind called. "I think she's going to be okay." He replied almost immediately, "You're going to get a reputation for this." She looked at the text for a moment and then typed back, "I think I already have one." She stood at her kitchen window with her coffee and looked out at the garden, at the things she had planted that were just beginning to come through the ground. It was early still, barely April, and everything was provisional, but there was something there. You could see it if you looked. Mitchell had been ordered to complete a financial restitution schedule and was facing a separate professional review at his firm. Vanessa had left him 2 weeks after his second arrest, according to the mutual acquaintance who had messaged Delia in November with Mitchell's version of events, and who now seemed to want to provide updates. Delia read this message and then put her phone down and went back to her garden. She had stopped thinking about what happened to Mitchell in the same way she had stopped following a highway that no longer went anywhere she needed to go. He existed somewhere. His choices had produced his life. She wished him nothing in particular, which felt like exactly the right amount. That summer Carolyn called with an unexpected question. "I'm developing a workshop," she said, "for women going through financial separation processes. I want it to be practical. What to document, when to do it, how to protect yourself early. I think you'd be a useful voice in the room." "I'm a physiotherapist," Delia said. "You're someone who went through this and came out the other side knowing exactly what she needed and when she needed it." That's not the same as a lawyer and it's not less useful. A pause. Think about it. She thought about it for 3 days and then said yes. The workshop was in a church basement in the West End on a Thursday evening in October. 14 women came. Delia talked for 20 minutes about the night she found the bank records, about the notebook, about the way documentation had changed the entire shape of her situation. She talked about what it felt like to go from believing she had nothing to understanding that she had been building her case all along, without knowing it. Afterward, 4 women stayed to ask questions. One of them had brought her own notebook. Delia gave her the name of a good pen brand and Carolyn's business card. A year after November, she stood in her garden in the early evening and thought about where she had been 12 months ago. The recycling bins. The boxes. The way her voice had come out smaller than she intended. She had not known then that the feeling of having nothing left to lose was actually a kind of freedom. She had not understood that the life she would build without Mitchell would fit her better in every way than the life she had spent 9 years adjusting herself to fit around him. Noel came around the side fence with Zara, who had decided they were visiting for dinner and had apparently communicated this to her father as a fact rather than a proposal. She was carrying a grocery bag and narrating what she intended to make. Delia held the gate open. She planned the whole menu on the drive over, Noel said. I have strong opinions about what you should do with that rosemary, Zara said, pointing at the garden. Tell me, said Delia. She listened. She learned something about rosemary. She went inside and made dinner in a kitchen the color she had always wanted, in a house that was hers, in a life she was building exactly the way she intended. Mitchell had once told her she didn't know how to make things work. He had meant it as a criticism. She had let herself believe it for 9 years. She had turned out to be very good at making things work. She just needed to be the one deciding what they were working toward.